So let's get right into it. Think about this. Can a novel, just a story, be so powerful that a global superpower sees it as a genuine threat? Could a love story actually become a weapon in a massive ideological war? Well, today we're talking about Dr. Zhivago, a book that didn't just tell a story, it became a wild one itself.
And this quote right here from the author Boris Pasternak, it just cuts right to the heart of everything. See, this isn't just about big politics or battles, it's about the deep, personal cost of living a lie, the toll that a system takes on your soul when you can't speak your truth. This is the real battleground we're going to explore.
At its core, Dr. Zhivago is really a story about two people who are just trying to carve out a small, private space for themselves while the world around them is literally, and I mean literally, tearing itself apart. So let's meet them.
So first, you've got Yuri Zhivago. He's a deep thinker, a doctor, a poet. His world is all internal, about finding truth and beauty. And then there's Lara Gashar, who's this incredibly strong woman trying to escape the clutches of a corrupt older man and just find some dignity for herself. Their lives start out on completely different tracks, totally unaware of each other.
But their paths finally cross in, well, the most dramatic way you can imagine, during World War I. He's a doctor on the front lines, she's a nurse. And right there, in the middle of all that chaos and horror, they find this profound instant connection. And that relationship, their attempt to hold on to something real and personal, that's the sun that this entire novel orbits around.
But here's where the book gets really interesting. The real villain isn't some person, right? It's not a jealous rival or corrupt official. No, the main antagonist of this story is history itself. This relentless, massive force that just grinds down individual lives without a second thought.
And just look at what our characters are up against. First, the absolute devastation of World War I. Then, before they can even catch their breath, there are two revolutions in a single year that turn society completely upside down. And if that wasn't enough, it's followed by a horrible civil war that pits friend against friend, neighbor against neighbor. You can't escape it.
So here's the key takeaway. Pasternak is arguing that in times like these, your personal life, your love, your family, your passions, it's not yours anymore. It's constantly being hijacked and twisted by these giant forces way outside your control. The struggle isn't about winning some war, it's about just trying to exist as an individual.
And this brings us to the book's really powerful philosophical core. This isn't just a historical drama. It's a deep, profound argument against ideology, against any system that puts some abstract idea above the lives of actual human beings. This is the fundamental question Pasternak is asking. What's left of you when a government or a party tells you exactly what to think, how to feel, and who you're supposed to be? Zhivago is the guy who refuses to surrender his inner world, his conscience. And in the new system, that refusal makes him incredibly dangerous.
And you see this perfectly with the character of Lara's husband, Pasha. He starts out as the sensitive, idealistic young man, but then the revolution just consumes him. He renames himself Strelnikov, which means the shooter. He literally sheds his old identity, his love, his humanity, all to become just a tool of the state, a ruthless, brutally efficient killing machine.
And Pasternak does not pull any punches. I mean, the novel is a total takedown of what the revolution actually meant for people. It shows how promises of freedom led to forced conformity, how the idea of justice turned into brutal class revenge, and how families were just ripped to shreds by all of it. It was a direct assault on the heroic story the Soviet Union told about itself.
Okay, so the novel is a powerful critique of the system. But this is where the story goes from fiction to something unbelievable. The themes in the book, repression, ideological control, they suddenly became terrifyingly real for Pasternak himself.
So when Pasternak finished the novel, not a single publisher in the Soviet Union would touch it. The state's official literary gatekeepers basically called it politically harmful and banned it. And why? Because it dared to suggest the revolution wasn't some glorious moment of triumph, but a deeply human tragedy. It just refused to praise the state.
So Pasternak takes this enormous risk. He gets the manuscript smuggled out of the country to an Italian publisher. The book comes out and it's an immediate international sensation. And then he wins the Nobel Prize in Literature, the highest honor there is. But to the Soviet government, this was the ultimate act of betrayal. They launched this vicious public smear campaign, calling him a traitor and forcing him to refuse the prize. He went from a celebrated author to an enemy of the people overnight.
So just picture this. You've got this book, it's officially banned in its own country because it's considered dangerous, subversive, a threat to the entire Soviet system. And right there, the story gets even weirder.
Yep,
You heard that right. In one of the most incredible twists of the Cold War, the CIA gets a hold of the manuscript. They see its potential as a weapon, and they secretly print thousands of tiny, pocket-sized Russian-language copies, all to be smuggled back into the Soviet Union. It became this massive underground hit, passed from person to person in secret.
And this isn't some conspiracy theory, this is from an actual declassified CIA memo. They knew exactly what they were doing. They saw that by simply telling a human story that contradicted the official government line, the book itself became a powerful piece of propaganda. It's just a beautiful and deeply ironic fate for a novel that's all about condemning political manipulation.
So what do we take away from all this, from this incredible story of a story? What was it about this novel that made it so threatening to one superpower and, well, so useful to another?
Well, the novel doesn't end with some big political battle. It ends with a collection of Yuri Zhivago's poems. And that's Pasternak's final, beautiful statement. He's saying that in a world where politics destroys everything and ideology consumes all, the only things that stay true are art, poetry, and love. That is the last refuge for the human spirit.
And this right here, this is the most important point. Boris Pasternak wasn't trying to overthrow the government. He wasn't a political activist. His crime, the thing that made him so dangerous, was much deeper. He simply insisted that truth, immorality, and beauty, they exist on their own, outside of the state's control. And in a totalitarian system, that simple refusal is the most revolutionary act there is.
Which leaves us with a pretty challenging question, one that's just as relevant now as it was back then. When you're being pushed to conform, when propaganda is everywhere, what is the single most powerful act of resistance you have?
Pasternak gives us his answer. It's not about fighting or rebellion. It's the quiet, stubborn act of holding on to your own conscience. He's arguing that history, with all its giant armies and grand ideas, is absolutely meaningless without the individual people who live it, who feel it, and who judge it for themselves. And that, right there, is the undying power of Dr. Zhivago.